So for those who may be new, just a reminder of the fifth precept that we are working with, or the fifth of the mindfulness mind trainings. And our version has been aware of the suffering caused by unmindful consumption. I undertake the training to cultivate good health, both physical and mental, for myself, my family, my society, and my habitat by practicing mindful eating, drinking, and consuming. I undertake the training to ingest only items that preserve peace, well-being, and joy in my body, in my consciousness, and in the collective body and consciousness of my family, society, and the natural world. And these are trainings, they are not commandments, as a reminder. I always need that reminder, know thou musts, only you might want to. Ah, well, let me get myself situated here so I can remember what I'm supposed to be talking about. There we go. I was at a problem gambling conference last week, and the initial keynote speaker brought up the common saying, too much of a good thing. And this paradoxical statement really resonated with me, brought me right up into the challenge of the fifth precept, which encourages, as I just read, us to practice more mindful consumption and to recognize and be more aware of the suffering that's caused by unmindful consumption. Certainly many, if not all, of our consumptive, intoxicating behaviors are pleasurable, or at least seem to take away our pain, at first, at least. Eating, drinking, gambling, playing video games, being on social media or Netflix, shopping, and so forth. They all release a bolus of dopamine, the pleasure chemical, into our brains and create feelings of pleasure. Our brains notice this pleasure and want more. This is what our brains are built to do. They're just doing their job. They tell us this is good. Let's keep at it. Let's get some more. The extreme end of this seeking for pleasure can become addiction. But we're all on a continuum of wanting what feels good and wanting what lessens our suffering. Our practice teaches us that this is part of our common humanity, and we're all susceptible to wanting too much of a good thing. The fifth precept encourages us to be more discerning of whether what initially makes me feel good or what seems to relieve my suffering is actually beneficial, and to become aware when enough is enough, and when to notice when my consumption may cloud my mind to what is real and true or invite in the unhelpful. I can notice when this happens, and I can say yes to what feels good and brings some pleasure, and when I need to say no. The four endeavors that Bill and Susan talked about last week are great ways to practice this. And before we can even notice what's wholesome and beneficial, we may need to say no, to refrain from what causes harm or interferes with developing the beneficial. This is no easy matter. To let go of what seems like the answer and the solution to my discomfort, to my stress, to my dis-ease, before I'm even certain of a more beneficial alternative. when I'm feeling restless, bored, anxious, angry, and notice these unpleasant feelings arising, to take a pause before I go to my smartphone or grab a bag of chips or turn on Netflix or go shopping. This is the challenge. When we can do this and take the pause and meet this challenge, we need, as Susan would say, to make much of it and give ourselves that big gold mindfulness star. I did it. And we run into these situations all the time. They're part of everyday life. My friend and I went to the cemetery for Father's Day to remember and honor our ancestors. And he hadn't eaten breakfast before we left, and he was really hungry by the time we were driving home. And he had just the other day discovered a brand new Sheetz convenience store, nice and shiny and sparkly new. And so he thought, well, I could stop for some snacks on the way home. But he was also trying to eat healthier. And he was able to take a moment and say to me and himself, there's nothing good for me at that store. I'm just going to go in and buy a bunch of junk food. And I know there's a good, healthy salad waiting for me at home. Well, as we drove past the Sheetz store, we high-fived each other. Did it. Appreciating that it took effort to make that wise decision. And we also made much of enjoying the salad and savoring the freshness and the flavor and the healthiness of that meal when we got home. As Bill mentioned last week, we begin to practice to learn ways to address our arrested self-soothing. And this bumps us up against another paradox that friends and I have often talked about, or rather complained about. Why is it that everything that feels so good is bad for me? What's that about? I particularly remember complaining about this with my friends in grad school as we dealt with the anxiety of finishing papers many, many years ago and taking exams. And it was so easy to find relief or comfort in junk food, alcohol, or weed. The addendum to that thought is, why is it that things that are bad for me seem so easily and quickly accessible and make me feel so good without any effort? And the things that are good for me take so much more effort. Again, what is that about? But that may be why the 4 endeavors that were the focus of last week are also called the 4 exertions. They do require mindful direction of our energies. And for me, being a slow learner, as Bill would say, it's taken much learning about the futility and continuing pain of what seem to be easy fixes via unmindful consumption, and to be willing to let them go and to put the energy and effort into becoming more discerning about not inviting them in. In mindful addiction recovery practice, the acronym SOBER is often used to create the pause and the space to consider releasing the unhelpful and cultivating the beneficial. And that acronym stands for stop, take that pause, give it a minute, and look inward, observe what's going on in here. And take a breath and provide yourself some space and comfort before you expand outward again with more mindfulness, hopefully responding in a more beneficial way. As we practice, we can begin to notice what it feels like when we invite the wholesome and beneficial to be present. Perhaps a bit of contentment, some satisfaction, some joy. And when they are around, to savor this, we can orient to what is helpful and beneficial and learn how to develop comfort and a bit more ease. We can say yes to these fruits of our practice, while we also notice if we begin tipping over into trying to cling to these beneficial and pleasurable feelings, or we start leaning into the greediness of wanting too much of a good thing. In my practice, there are times when I notice such sweet moments when everything seems to be right, just the way it is. It all fits and makes sense. My heart opens and warms into a space of peace and gratitude and love. But it often seems as soon as I become aware of this, it evaporates. It just goes away. And it's so tempting to want to chase after it, to grasp after it. And as soon as I do, I notice the tightening up and the clenching. I am trying to practice noticing delightful moments with a light touch that allows them to linger just a bit longer, and appreciate how such sweet moments arise and then fade away. Just as I practice not holding on to a glorious sunrise as it transforms into the full light of day. I practice remembering that neither I nor anyone else can live in constant pleasure, even in meditation practice. The Buddha's parents tried to protect him from the reality of life and did their best to create the illusion that life could always be pleasurable. It didn't work for the Buddha, and it certainly hasn't worked for me. The Buddha came to terms with the reality of the first noble truth, that life is difficult and at times painful, that we can't escape from the truth of old age, sickness, and death, that we'll be separated from all that we hold dear, and that we'll have to face the consequences of our actions. By recognizing that we don't have the power to change this reality, we can wake up and learn how to be empowered to ease our suffering. As Susan said last week, the Buddha showed us that we can do this. This is the real hope that the practice provides. We let go of what doesn't work to relieve our suffering, all our external fixes, all our consumption that may range from eating a tub of Haagen-Dazs ice cream or a whole bag of potato chips to binging on Netflix or staying constantly busy or overworking or et cetera, et cetera. All these unhelpful activities that trick our brains by providing these jolts of dopamine. If rather than consuming more and wanting more, we open the door of mindfulness to check inside and see what might help us feel full rather than having to be filled up, we can face the truth of reality with a bit more acceptance, kindness, and compassion. And notice, perhaps, how the first deep breath of a practice brings a bit of calm with the sweet feeling of soothing that stabilizes and grounds, and the heart warming as we tell ourselves we're still good people. This is the heart of the practice. This is enough. Thank you so much for your very kind attention. Let's practice now. Let's put this into practice. All right. So let's prepare ourselves. Cultivate the wholesomeness of tending to our bodies as the beginning of our practice. We can stretch into the space, perhaps first leaning one way with a lovely in-breath and out-breath, and then stretching the other way as we breathe in and out, letting the hands float down softly and gently, and perhaps twisting if that fits for you, knowing what your body needs in this moment. Just enough of a delightful movement that helps the body loosen, soften, and just feeling all the space around the body. The space that we can fill with our breathing. Perhaps noticing what pleasantness a deeper than usual breath might bring. Just a bit more calm or softness, or perhaps a lovely feeling of heaviness settling down to stabilize our base. Whatever arises for you. Or maybe noticing some discomfort or distress, and playing with how that might benefit from a bit of soothing, softening, putting a pillow under your heart. And savoring, appreciating whatever can be held in this safe and beneficial holding environment. Kindly, gently. and just check in. Where might I bring a bit more ease or softness to my face, my shoulders, my hands, a bit more comfort and peace to my stomach, to my heart. And in the remaining minutes of this practice, perhaps dropping in a bit of gratitude. Gratitude for you being here with us and us being here with you. Gratitude for this moment being enough.